tonight, ladies and gentlemen, on Teachers Appreciation Tuesday, we have our special cosmic sister, our galactic guest, our universal mother, Miss AlaenuRa Adams, as you may know her on Facebook. She's hanging out with us tonight, and we are having a interstellar time, I would say.
Wow.
Man. So yeah, and it's funny. Like before we went to the break, we kind of touched on a little bit of the extraterrestrial thing. I remember that you were on Facebook. You let us know that you had been recently to Peru. Right? And
yeah.
I saw something. I think it's MIT who sends me this stuff, but I get in emails from all these different places. I think it was a MIT article in the MIT download where they spoke about some form being, again, discovered from somewhere. I don't know where they dug this particular little mummy up from, but they're saying, they don't know if it's real or not, but there's scientists all involved with this, and they have this little being that has the 3 fingers, and they don't know if it's a mutated human, a mummified cast kind of thing they're looking at, or if this is actual proof of extraterrestrial, here, and that happened over in Peru within the last week. So I thought that was interesting, you being in Peru. Maybe you were going to visit a cousin of yours or something. Who knows? We don't know. We're just humans, right? But, we're watching. We're watching as much as we can.
We're all cousins.
We're all cousins. Okay, please.
We're all cousins. We're all related. We really are, and that's why I love going to places like Peru, because I love traveling and being on the land and really tuning into the information that it offers, right? And what makes it really special is when the indigenous people are still there, and like when I visited America, the land spoke to me, and I was looking for the indigenous people, and I hardly found any. And then when I did find them, a lot of them had been deprogrammed and, were really in quite a sorry state, and we are in a time now which is called the 7th generation, right, where it's the end of a cycle of 7 generations, and this is a really important time that as elders that we make sure that the new custodians of the world, those that hold the wisdom of living on the planet, who understand what it means to be human, can and bring in new information, right? Because as we spoke about technology, it's not going to go away. So somehow there's a merging now of the old world and the new world. And this wisdom, the wisdom of our ancestors, the wisdom of old, needs to come together with the new information that is now coming into the planet in terms of our relationship with the rest of the universe as universal souls. Even in my grandparents' time, before technology and the internet, their world was their community, was the land that they could access, right? Now we're living, our community has become the whole world. So whatever happens here affects what happens on the other side of the world, right? And this in itself, this is why technology, in a way, has actually brought us to this point, right? Because we are aware of what's happening all over the world. All you have to do is watch the news, right? International news.
Right. You don't have to ask the shaman.
Yeah, exactly. So in the past, perhaps it was more purist, right? And these indigenous cultures, they would have the shaman. And what was interesting about the shaman was that, he would or she would live on the edge of the community, right? So they could come into the community and bring in the wisdom, bring in the information or whatever. And also, during certain times of the month, if there was some cosmic event or whatever, they would go into trance, or, like in Africa, they would dress up in a masquerade, in like these really kind of as deities that were to be feared. And this was just as a way of exorcising the shadow from the community, if you understand what I mean. Right?
Yes, exercising the shadow, you call it, though? Is it just the shadow of the community? Right.
The shadow within the psyche of the community.
Yeah, the negative cloud that's hanging over.
Yeah, which is part of life, love, and living. We have shadow, we have negative energies and positive energies. And, when I say negative, it doesn't necessarily mean bad. It just has a different polar aspect or characteristic. You know what I mean? And if it's left unattended, it begins to fester. So it's important to exorcise it, to remove it, to bring it out. So whether that means going into some sort of trance dance or some rhythmic, quite often they're very powerful rhythms that take you into an altered state, which helps the body to release these denser energies. A lot of them use a lot of movement with, and just by stamping on the ground, it's a way of releasing pent-up energy or tension or frustration. And in fact, it brings really powerful medicine to the body and the community, because it's done together, right? That's why dancing is so powerful, and singing and mantras, and of course being silent and meditation and all those different things. They all bring different types of medicine.
To put it in, more layman terms, a lot of those things that the shaman, the dancers, the medicine men, the masks, the deities, the different wear, the drums, the stomping of the feet, all of that to remove this this opposite polarity called negativity, if it's positive, and we want to consider what they were doing, the positive aspect. So all of that was to basically, in a spiritual sense, cut the spiritual grass, right? Because those weeds would fester if you allow them to just go unattended.
It's to stay healthy. Yeah, it's to stay healthy, And the part of you that's staying healthy isn't just physical, isn't just your body and your mind, it's your soul, it's your psyche, right? It keeps a balance. And it also keeps a neutrality or an equanimity within you, which is what so many faiths around the world talk about, finding this middle road, finding the balance, of, that's going to sustain harmony.
Like you said, with the positive and the negative, if you bring it all the way down to a human level, that would mean good and bad. Now, if you expand outward to where you are, of course, positive and negative are just opposite polarities, and they have nothing to do with right and wrong. They just are the balance to one another. But then you come down into a small little place like the human mind, and a human is like the caveman of the universe. You know what I mean?
Evolving. We are evolving, and we have evolved, in fact, I mean, it's really the definition of self is often, is based on whatever labels you place upon yourself, right? In terms of identities, roles, in terms of, age, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, all these different things. And this is just the palette in which, humanity exists within. It's a vast spectrum. It's not just one end, like gay or straight or black or white. There's a whole spectrum in between. And unfortunately, humanity has, I think partly due to the scientific mind, we have felt the need to deconstruct what was already total, complete, and whole into its various components, and quite often into, its polar aspects. And I think to humanity's detriment. I think that's changing, because the roles and these categories that we find ourselves in, we are realizing that they can no longer contain us. And if we continue to be contained within them, we're going to experience more separation and more duality, as in, them and us, or, so I think the brain isn't actually small. I think it's as vast as you allow it to be. It really depends what you allow to go in it, and what you allow to define yourself by, quite literally, right? So, there's so many incredible human stories out there of people who have moved through really difficult times or horrific situations and transcended the limitations that could have been placed upon them. You know what I mean?
I do. I
am
one of them.
Yeah, exactly. We all are. Just by virtue of being human, we are destined to have a menagerie of experiences, right?
Yeah.
And I actually feel that the medicine is in the challenges, is in the struggle. That's how we learn who we are. That's where we are pushed to our limits, or we find our back get so far up against the wall that we can't carry on with a charade, or we can't carry on with a cover story that we've been telling ourselves or convincing ourselves that's who we are.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And an example of that is when, particularly in the West, when people fall through the net, when they lose their job, or they lose their home, or they become bankrupt, or they get some sort of diagnosis or something like that, right? And, and these kind of things really end up teaching us who we truly are, For example, I'm sure my brother won't mind me saying this, my brother has multiple sclerosis. And, he defined himself just as a stereotypical man, actually, what it means to be a man, I'm a provider, I'm a husband, I need to work, I need to feed my children, all these sort of things. So what happens when, you're an able-bodied man and then virile, able-bodied man, and then all of a sudden you're collapsing. After a few months or a few years, you're in a wheelchair. After some time after that, you're not able to take care of your personal needs. And the question is, who is he? Who am I? Right? Is he still the same person? So, I witnessed him having to really being challenged with all of those programs, of what it meant to be a man. Not to be human, but to be a man. And see those become dismantled, right? And what's really interesting is that I've seen him soften in the most beautiful way. In ancient Egypt, there's this, in the Book of the Dead, when people cross over into the afterlife, their heart is weighed next to the feather, right?
The feather.
So, right? So that really
yeah.
talks about any density, any kind of heaviness, any kind of karma, or any kind of hoocha, or whatever you want to call it, any dense energy that you may have brought with you from past lifetimes or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, many people were saying to my brother, oh, poor man, he's had to do this or he's had to go through that. And yet, who's to say that everything is in divine order, that his heart is now as light as a feather? Now, would that have happened if he hadn't have had this diagnosis? Would he have? Would he have had?
Not.
Yeah.
Very
I wonder.
Likely not. Yeah. A lot of times our journey, our path, our sojourn is designed for us to be able to put our heart on the other opposite scale side of a feather. So we go through all of these seemingly tumultuous and crazy tribulations, trials and tribulations, and we like, why would this have happened to me? And then at the end, your heart is balanced with a feather, and now it all makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Because this is the only way. And, also what you were saying about, us getting too scientific, and we're checking out this and we're exploring that, and we've gone from, looking at rocks and seashells to we're now looking through, neutron microscopes, and we're looking at, we're dealing with, physics in from, the metaphysics to, the microphysics, and we're looking inside the cell and looking inside the atom and looking inside the quark and looking inside the wave and the particle. And, it's almost like, the whole that is all of us being one. We're now separate people, separate individuals, and now, as a part from the whole, we're looking at our whole as a part, though we're just a slice of pizza trying to figure out what the entire pizza pie would look like. And somebody like James Allen would say that was impossible. Now, the entire pie would obviously know what a slice of pizza looks like. Obviously, the whole can see the part. The part would never be able to see the whole. But with us doing all of this scientific research and all of these experiments and digging deeper and deeper and deeper and cracking everything down smaller and smaller and smaller and looking further and further into space, which is, very tentative in itself, because, there's different things to be said about that. But could we be kind of, deconstructing the universe in a sense to where we're trying to reverse engineer reality?
I think we are. I think partly we are, but we're also constructing the universe as we.
Constructing. Okay.
As we bear witness to it. So that in itself is expanding our awareness of, where we are in the cosmos and who we are as human beings, to be able to look down a microscope and to go down to the basic elements, into the atoms, and then, the subparticles. And then when we look close enough, what's interesting about these particles is that it's only by looking at them that they start doing something based upon the mere observation, if you know what I mean. So that's really interesting to me, because it suggests that that we live in a intelligent, there's intelligence all around us, and even if we can say, that scientifically that these are particles, and they have intelligence, but then, it's so easy to kind of miss the point somehow, in that everything is intelligence, is part of that intelligence. Even the space in between the particles has intelligence, and perhaps that's more the feminine side of things, because earlier we were talking about, or you mentioned the two parts of the brain, and I find that really quite interesting, because even in terms of human behavior, there is something that I call the gender agenda. For 50 years we've been talking about ethnicity, or I wouldn't say the word race because we're all one human race, but in terms of differences in color, and we've been really looking at that and how that has affected, created separation, slavery, all these different things, who's more superior, whatever. And, with the gender agenda, as I call it, it's the same sort of thing, It's if you're going to stand up and say, I'm a white man or I'm a black man, and whatever that means to you, the fact that you're putting these prefixes before the word man even, and when I say man, what I really mean is human being, then that is creating some sort of stance. If that makes sense.
That's true.
It's creating some
that
sort of
makes a lot
stance.
of sense.
Yeah. So it's the same thing with the gender agenda, you know. I mean, it's just incidental that we are in a body that has a gender and that has a color, let alone any other idiosyncrasies that you may find that you have, which may be totally natural to you. However, you know, if we really allow ourselves to limit ourselves by those, then it creates the small I am, you know, rather than I am a human being. In other words, the consciousness that is living or even looking from behind my eyes is the same consciousness as is looking from behind your eyes that is existing within you. But it's moving through the filters of identities, moving through the filters of your experiences and whatever you believe to be real.
You're right. Right.
You know?
So it's translated almost, transcribed through our ears and eyes and nose, mouth, and hands. Our particular version of reality.
Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because it's incidental. There's nothing wrong with it. It's only if we limit ourselves to them, you know. There's something called the human condition that we exist within. It's just like, you know, if I live in London, which I do, and it rains a lot and it's cloudy, those are weather conditions, right? But the human condition is a form of a weather condition, right, that we exist within. It's, you know, people may call it the status quo. People may say, oh, that's life. That's just life. You can't do anything about that. Oh, that's men for you. Oh, that's women for you. Oh, you can't do anything about that. That's just the way it is. You know, and I think that's a cop-out. I think we have settled for certain things. If we can create all this technology, if we can, discover these particles we were talking about, or view the most distant parts of space, and yet there are certain things about being human that we feel, oh, that's just the way it is. Who said so? Who says so? What happened whereby we allowed these limiting ideas and constructs to define a species?
Who did? Yeah. Well, there are social engineers that I'm sure would love to take some credit for that, if you allow them to. And then there are some people who would love to attribute the credit to some social engineering MK Ultra process or project or, agenda. But you're right. Who gave us all of this distraction? Who gave us all of this distraction? And the distraction is so unique and beautiful in a sense of what it does and what it has the ability, the way that it's so effective. The distraction is so effective that, one might lead to believe that the distraction may have been created by some sort of scientist because it's so good. It's, able to, obviously, whatever the distraction is, or maybe maybe distraction itself is its own entity, and it has evolved to a degree to where it can now, before it
become
couldn't enter
conscious
the
of itself.
Right.
Exactly. Right. I agree with you. I wouldn't even give these so-called people that much credit.
That kind of credit?
Because they're existing with it themselves. They're in duality, they're in the sense of them and us, So, it's their construct. I mean, what's so beautiful and so magical about the time that we're living in, which was inevitable, that through technology, through the fact that we're living on a global village where everybody is connected now, right, in terms of commerce and, even politically. I won't even go about how America has the audacity to start interfering in other people's business when they need to sort out their own business. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, as you know, Britain came out of Europe, and you know, I for one kind of feel from a wider perspective that we're not ready for a world government, right? We need to evolve to the point where we come together as one, however that will happen.
Right. I was going to ask you if the telltale sign of that evolution would be us all coming together in a unification as uni-field, unified, universe.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, prior to 2012, I think so many people imagined that, you know, on the 21st of December that the whole world would go into some kind of rapture or something, you know. But I believe we are in a rapture. But the thing is that the rapture that we're experiencing, for those people who are awakening, it's a rapture that wasn't going to be a 24-hour or 48-hour rapture where the whole planet stands still. It's a rapture that has been extended through a period of between 15 and 20 years, right? So it's like many people are finding themselves in a place that some of the ancients called a time of non-time, right? Where it's like this period between the ages, between the end of the age of Pisces and now the age of Aquarius, which isn't just, you know, an age which is significant enough, but it's a quantum age. It's a quantum age. It's 26,000 years. And we've also come out of a 6,000 lunar cycle. So that's more of the shadow aspect, you know, of like a wider time scale, and we're moving into a sun cycle. So huge changes are happening as we align with this central sun of the galaxy, right? So there are all these things that are igniting, almost like rebooting dormant parts of our being. You know, some people may call that DNA. Some people may call that aspects of the brain, you know, or our consciousness, or our relationship with a wider super consciousness, if you like, you know.
Absolutely. And as we know that a change is definitely going to come. We're gonna take a quick break. Let you grab a cup of water, and we will be right back with Miss AlaenuRa Adams speaking to us from her cosmic dimension of reality called greatness, and we're going to talk about that.